Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary tales and boundless imagination come to life. Enjoy the story and don't forget to subscribe. The neon lights of Nova Prime's Pleasure District painted Jackson Reynolds' face in a kaleidoscope of colors as he stalked through the crowded streets. Holographic advertisements flickered overhead, promising everything from instant pleasure to eternal life. Jackson ignored them all, his focus razor-sharp on the mission at hand. His wrist computer pinged, updating the location of his target. Tyos Van, a notorious arms dealer and all-around scumbag, was holed up in the Supernova, one of the district's most exclusive night spots, perfect hunting ground. As he approached the entrance, a group of Martian traders stumbled out, their crimson skin flushed darker from too much synthetic alcohol. One of them recognized him and nudged his companions. Holy moons, that's Jackson Reynolds, the bounty hunter. The legend himself. Jackson tipped an imaginary hat and strode past them into the club. Music pulsed through the air, the bass so deep it rattled his bones. The interior was a masterpiece of modern decadence, curved walls that seemed to be made of liquid silver, anti-grav platforms where exotic dancers of various species performed impossible routines, and private booths shrouded in privacy fields that sparkled like diamonds. He made his way to the bar, ordering a lunar whiskey neat. The bartender, a four-armed Diluvian, served him with a reverent nod. Jackson took a sip, letting the familiar burn center him as his enhanced eyes scanned the crowd. That's when he heard it, a human. Please. I'd sooner sleep with a Centaurian slime beast. The voice was melodious, yet dripping with disdain. Jackson's interest piqued. The speaker was a woman, if you could call such a creature merely a woman. Her skin was a deep, mesmerizing blue that seemed to shimmer in the club's lighting. She had a figure that defied physics, curves that could start a war, all wrapped in a dress that looked painted on. Her features were undeniably humanoid, but with an alien perfection that made her all the more alluring. She was holding court in a booth nearby, surrounded by admirers of various species. Especially that Reynolds character, she continued, rolling her eyes. Everyone's so obsessed with him. A few lucky catches and suddenly he's God's gift to the galaxy. Jackson's grip tightened on his glass. In 15 years of hunting, he'd developed a thick skin against all sorts of insults, but something about this blue beauty's dismissal got under it. He made his way over, a predatory smile on his face. Sounds like someone's been reading the tabloids. The woman looked up, her silver eyes widening slightly before narrowing in recognition. Speaking of the devil, she said coolly. Come to prove me right about human arrogance. Just thought I'd give you the chance to insult me to my face, Mr. Reynolds. She said, not offering her hand, my name is Nala and I wasn't insulting you, merely stating facts. Jackson leaned against their table, ignoring the starstruck looks from her companions. Facts like the fact that I've brought in more high-level targets than any other hunter in the sector. Or the fact that my success rate is unmatched. Facts like humans being predictable, overconfident. She gave him a dismissive once-over, and disappointingly simple. The air crackled with tension. Nala's admirers looked between them, sensing the building storm. Before Jackson could respond, a new voice cut in. Nala, darling, you're not wasting your breath on this earther, are you? A tall, elegant figure materialized beside them. Zale, another notorious hunter, his metallic skin gleaming as he flashed a too-perfect smile. Just explaining some cultural differences, Nala said, her tone warming considerably. Allow me to buy you a proper drink, away from the riffraff. Zale purred, extending his hand as Nala accepted his invitation. Jackson's wrist computer vibrated. A message scrolled across his retinal display, target spotted, VIP section, moving to secondary location. He watched Nala walk away with Zale, her hips swaying hypnotically. Something about her reaction seemed off. It was too rehearsed, too perfect, and Jackson hadn't survived this long by ignoring his instincts. He tapped his computer, initiating a deep scan of the club's security network. As the data streamed in, his eyes widened. Nala had arrived with none other than Tyos Ven himself, and Zale, he was on the payroll of a rival syndicate. Jackson swore under his breath. This simple hunt had just gotten a lot more complicated, and a lot more interesting. He signaled the bartender for another drink, his mind already formulating plans. Nala might think humans were simple and predictable, but she was about to learn otherwise. One way or another, he'd get his target, and if he managed to change a certain blue beauty's mind about humans in the process, well, that would just be a bonus. Jackson nursed his drink, mind racing. The club's security feed showed Nala and Zale heading to a private room upstairs. Tyos Ven was there too, surrounded by bodyguards that looked more machine than organic. A Neptunian server drifted by, her translucent body rippling with bioluminescence. Mr. Reynolds, a gift from an admirer. She placed a glowing tail before him. Jackson scanned it automatically, clean, but expensive. He glanced around and caught the eye of a violet-skinned Andromedan giving him a sultry wave. Any other night, he might have been interested, tonight, he had bigger fish to fry. He made his way toward the VIP section, his implants already hacking the security protocols. A burly Kren bouncer moved to stop him, tentacles flexing menacingly. Jackson flashed a smile and his hunter's license. Official business. The Kren's eyes swirled with suspicion, but he stepped aside. Upstairs, the music was muted, the lighting more subdued. Through sound-dampening fields, Jackson caught snippets of conversation from the private rooms, business deals, political intrigue. The typical high-stakes games of Nova Prime's elite. He found Nala's voice among them. The shipment arrives tomorrow, Tyos. My brother ensures smooth passage through customs. Excellent, my dear. And what of our competition? Has Zale dealt with them permanently? Jackson's jaw clenched. So, the beautiful Nala was more than just arm candy, she was neck-deep in Ven's operation. A sharp laugh cut through his thoughts, Zale speaking. Speaking of competition, that human downstairs, Reynolds, he could be a problem. Nala's voice dripped with scorn. I can handle one Earther hunter. Don't underestimate him, Ven growled. He's taken down better operations than ours. Jackson smiled. At least someone respected his abilities. He was about to make his move when the corridor exploded in gunfire. Plasma bolts sizzled past his head as a rival gang made their play. Jackson dived for cover behind a decorative pillar, drawing his own weapon. Through the chaos, he saw Nala emerge from the private room, a sleek pistol in each hand. She moved with lethal grace, her shots finding their marks with surgical precision. For a moment, Jackson forgot himself, admiring her skill. Then he saw the assassin she didn't. A shadow detached itself from the ceiling, razor-sharp claws extended. Without thinking, Jackson launched himself forward. He tackled Nala just as the assassin struck, feeling hot pain as claws raked his back instead of her throat. They landed in a tangle of limbs, her body impossibly soft against his. Her silver eyes met his, wide with surprise, and something else. For a heartbeat, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Then, Nala kneed him in the groin and rolled away, coming up shooting. The assassin fell, riddled with holes. I didn't need your help, human, she spat, but her voice trembled slightly. Jackson groaned, pulling himself up. You're welcome, Blue. More guards poured in. In the confusion, Jackson saw Ven slipping away through a hidden exit. Zale was nowhere to be seen. Nala must have noticed too. She backed toward another escape route, eyes never leaving Jackson. This doesn't make us even, Reynolds. Stay out of my business. Sweetheart, you're in mine now. Jackson's laugh was harsh. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then blew him a mocking kiss and disappeared through a holographic wall. Jackson swore creatively in 3 languages. His quarry was gone, he was injured, and he just complicated his mission by saving a criminal who clearly didn't want saving. But as he made his own escape, he couldn't help grinning. Back in his hotel room, he stripped off his ruined shirt, watching blue blood from the assassin dry on his skin. His computer chimed with an incoming message, a time and place sent from an anonymous account. Below it, 2 words, "Thank you." Jackson touched the wounds on his back, remembering the feel of Nala in his arms. He'd been hunting a weapons dealer, instead, he'd found something far more dangerous. As Nova Prime's 3 moons rose outside his window, Jackson began to plan. Nala thought humans were simple and predictable. He was about to prove her very, very wrong. But first, he needed a drink, and maybe some painkillers. Jackson's skin still tingled from the sonic shower as he stepped into the Crimson Nebula, Nova Prime's most exclusive pleasure den. The throbbing pain in his back had faded to a dull ache, thanks to some high-grade painkillers and the bottle of Arcturian brandy he downed. He needed a distraction. The mystery message from Nala kept playing in his mind, and he was tired of analyzing every syllable. A stunning Venusian hostess materialized beside him, her gossamer dress leaving little to the imagination. "The famous Jackson Reynolds," she purred. "How may we please you tonight?" Jackson flashed his most charming smile. "Surprise me." Minutes later, he found himself in a luxurious private suite with Lyra, a violet-skinned beauty whose pheromones made his head swim. Her multiple arms caressed him as they kissed, the taste of stardust nectar on her lips. But even as Lyra's skilled touches sent electricity through his body, Jackson's enhanced senses remained alert. So when the door whispered open, he noticed immediately. Nala stood in the doorway, her blue skin luminescent in the room's soft lighting. She wore a dress that seemed to be made of liquid metal, clinging to her curves like a second skin. Their eyes met, and Jackson saw a flicker of something cross her face before her usual mask of disdain slipped into place. "Well, well," she drawled, "how predictably human. When in doubt, visit a pleasure den." Jackson gently but firmly disentangled himself from Lyra's embrace. The Venusian made a sound of protest. "Sorry, beautiful," he said, not taking his eyes off Nala. "Rain check." Lyra's face darkened with anger. "You can't be serious." "For her." "I said, rain check." His tone left no room for argument as Lyra stormed out. Nala leaned against the door frame. That was rude, even for an Earther. Jackson straightened his clothes. "Didn't think you'd care about my manners, considering you tried to have me killed earlier. If I wanted you dead, Reynolds, you'd be dead." She stepped into the room, the door sealing behind her. "That assassin wasn't mine." Jackson moved closer, noting how she tensed slightly. "Just like you're not working with Tyos Venerable." In a blur of motion, Nala had him pinned against the wall, a slim blade pressed to his throat. Jackson could have countered the move, but he was too intrigued by the fire in her silver eyes. "You know nothing about me or my work," she hissed. "I know you're too smart to be just another syndicate lackey," Jackson said calmly despite the blade's cold kiss. "I know your brother's involved in customs fraud, and I know you're not as immune to me as you pretend to be." The blade pressed harder, a drop of blood trickled down his neck. "Arrogant human. Prove me wrong." Their faces were inches apart now. Jackson could feel the heat radiating from her body, smell the exotic perfume that seemed uniquely her. The tension between them was a living thing, electric and dangerous. Then Nala's lips crashed into his. The kiss was violent, all teeth and tongue in suppressed rage. Jackson matched her intensity, his hands finding her waist as hers tangled in his hair. The blade clattered, forgotten, to the floor. They broke apart, both breathing hard. Nala's perfect composure was shattered, her eyes wild, lips swollen. "This doesn't change anything," she gasped. Jackson smiled wolfishly. "Wouldn't dream of it." They came together again, tearing at each other's clothes. Nala's skin was like silk beneath his hands, burning hot to the touch. She bit his shoulder hard enough to draw blood, and he retaliated by lifting her against the wall, drawing a moan from her throat. "I still don't trust you," she panted as he kissed his way down her neck. "Smart woman," Jackson's voice was rough. "I don't trust you either." What followed was less lovemaking than it was combat by other means. They fought for dominance, each touch a challenge, each kiss a battle. When they finally collapsed, spent and sweating, the room looked like a war zone. Nala rolled away first, her movements liquid grace even now. She began gathering her scattered clothes, her back to Jackson. "This was a mistake," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Jackson propped himself up on an elbow, admiring the view. "Most fun mistake I've made in a while." She turned, and for a moment, her mask slipped. He saw vulnerability there, and fear. Then it was gone, replaced by her usual cool disdain. "Stay away from Ven, Reynolds. This is bigger than your bounty. Make me a better offer." Nala finished dressing, each movement deliberate. She walked to the door, then paused. "Next time we meet, I might have to kill you." Jackson grinned. "Looking forward to it, Blue." After she left, Jackson lay back, his body pleasantly sore. His wrist computer chimed, a message from his handler about Ven's movements. But for once, the hunt could wait. He touched his swollen lips, tasting the lingering traces of her. Nala might be playing some deeper game, but so was he. And he'd always enjoyed a good challenge. The next morning, Jackson woke with a pounding headache and the distinct feeling of having been used as a punching bag. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the wreckage of his hotel suite. He groaned and rolled over, trying to ignore the memories of the previous night. Nala was like a drug, addictive, dangerous, and guaranteed to leave you wanting more. He forced himself out of bed and into the sonic shower. The pulsing water did little to soothe his aching muscles, but it helped clear his head. As he dressed, he reviewed the data he'd gathered on Tyos Venerable. The man was a master of misdirection, always one step ahead. Tracking him down would be like chasing a ghost through a maze, and he was pretty sure he was not ready or had patience for it. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. He tensed, reaching for his weapon, and then he released a breath when he saw who it was. Corvus. What a pleasant surprise. Corvus Vale, Jackson's handler and a former mentor, was a grizzled veteran of countless conflicts. He was a man of few words and even fewer smiles, but Jackson knew he had a good heart, buried deep beneath layers of cynicism. "Ven's moving a shipment off-world tonight," Corvus said without preamble. "Orbital freight docks, Sector Gamma, 7. You're on point." "I'm on point." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "Or you're on point and I'm your backup." Corvus's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "Don't flatter yourself, Reynolds. Just do your job." "Speaking of jobs," Jackson said, "I think this one might be more complicated than we thought." He told Corvus about Nala's involvement with Ven, leaving out the more intimate details of their encounter. Corvus listened intently, his expression unchanging. An alien with a grudge against humans? Not exactly a new story. Be careful, Jackson. Don't let your libido cloud your judgment. My libido is perfectly capable of handling itself, Jackson retorted, but Corvus just grunted and turned to leave. Corvus, wait. I need some intel on Nala. Her real name, her background, anything you can find. Corvus hesitated, then nodded. I'll see what I can dig up. But remember, Reynolds, stay focused on the target. This isn't a dating service. Jackson sighed as the door closed behind Corvus. He knew his mentor was right, but something about Nala had burrowed under his skin. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was more than just a criminal, that there was something deeper driving her. He spent the rest of the day preparing for the operation. He checked his weapons, ran diagnostics on his ship, and reviewed the layout of the orbital freight docks. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across Nova Prime, he headed out. Sector Gamma 7 was a sprawling complex of warehouses and loading platforms, teeming with activity. Ships of all shapes and sizes lined the docks, their engines rumbling as cargo was loaded and unloaded. Jackson parked his ship in a concealed location and made his way to the docks on foot, his senses on high alert. He found Ven's transport easily enough. It was a sleek, unmarked freighter, guarded by a squad of heavily armed mercenaries. Jackson shadowed them, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. He was about to launch his attack when he spotted a familiar figure slipping through the shadows. Nala. She moved with the grace of a predator, silent and deadly. She neutralized two guards with lightning-fast strikes, then disappeared into the ship. Jackson cursed under his breath. He didn't know what she was planning, but he knew it couldn't be good. He followed her onto the ship, his weapon drawn. The interior was dimly lit and filled with crates of illicit goods. He could hear Nala moving ahead of him, her footsteps barely audible. Nala. This is getting tedious. I thought we could get along, but why you are here and tell me now? Jackson called out, his voice echoing through the ship. She appeared from the shadows, her eyes flashing with anger. I told you to stay out of my business, Reynolds. Why can't you listen? Because your business is my business, Jackson said, raising his weapon. Now, tell me what you're doing here. I'm taking what's mine, she said, her voice hard. Ven stole something from me, something I need back. What is it? Weapons? Drugs? It's none of your concern. Everything you do is my concern as long as it involves Venerable. He paused, studying her. Unless you have a better offer. Her expression softened for a moment, then hardened again. There's something you should know about my past, about why I hate humans, Reynolds. Something that changes everything. Jackson lowered his weapon slightly, intrigued. I'm listening. Nala hesitated, then began to speak. My real name is Nala Zora. I come from a planet called Cygnus Prime, a world rich in natural resources. Humans arrived, promising trade and prosperity. But they lied. They strip-mined our planet, poisoned our water, and enslaved my people. Her voice broke with emotion. My mother was a healer. She tried to help those who were sick and dying, but the humans didn't care. They saw us as nothing more than animals. She went on, one day, they came for my mother and brother too. I never saw them again. Jackson's heart ached for her. He knew what it was like to lose everything, to feel helpless in the face of overwhelming power. I'm sorry, Nala, he said softly. I didn't know. Do you think I wanted to hear your sorry words? She raised her head defiantly. That's why I hate humans, Reynolds. You're all the same, greedy, ruthless, and without honor. Not all of us, Jackson said, meeting her gaze. Some of us are trying to make a difference. Then prove it, she said, her voice challenging. Help me get what Ven stole, and maybe, just maybe, I'll start to believe you. Before Jackson could respond, an alarm blared through the ship. We've been detected. A voice shouted over the intercom. All hands on deck. Looks like our conversation will have to wait, Jackson said, raising his weapon. Ready to dance? Nala grinned, drawing her own weapons. Let's show them what we can do. They fought their way through the ship, back to back, a whirlwind of deadly force. Jackson was impressed by Nala's skill and ferocity. She moved like a dancer, graceful and deadly, her shots finding their marks with unerring accuracy. As they reached the cargo hold, they were confronted by Ven himself, surrounded by his mercenaries. Well, Ven said, sneering. Looks like the cat and mouse have joined forces. What a pity to see my dear Nala collaborating with a filthy human. Shut your mouth, Ven, Nala spat. You're the one who's filthy. Such harsh words, Ven said, feigning hurt. After all I've done for you. I gave you a purpose, a way to avenge your people. You used me, Nala said, her voice trembling with rage. You used my pain to further your own agenda. Don't be so dramatic, my dear, Ven said. We all use each other in this galaxy. It's the only way to survive. He gestured to his mercenaries. Kill them both. I want their bodies to be displayed as a warning to anyone who crosses me. The mercenaries opened fire. Jackson and Nala dove for cover, returning fire as they moved. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, tearing holes in the metal walls. Jackson saw one of the mercenaries take aim at Nala. Without thinking, he threw himself in front of her, taking the blast in his shoulder. He cried out in pain, stumbling backward. Nala caught him, her eyes filled with concern. Jackson. You idiot, why did you do that? Couldn't let you get hurt, he said, his voice weak. I didn't need your help. Maybe not, he said, but I needed to help you. Nala hesitated, then her expression hardened. Stay here. I'll finish this. She charged at Ven, her weapons blazing. The mercenaries fell before her, their bodies riddled with holes. Ven tried to run, but Nala cut him off, cornering him against a stack of crates. Any last words, Ven? She asked, her voice cold. You can't do this, Nala, Ven pleaded. I'm the only one who can give you what you want. I can help you destroy the humans who ruined your life. I don't need your help, Nala said. I'm going to do it myself. She raised her weapon, aiming it at Ven's head. But at the last moment, she hesitated. Jackson saw the conflict in her eyes. She wanted revenge, but she didn't want to become a killer. Do it, Nala, Jackson said, his voice strained. He deserves it. Nala closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and pulled the trigger. Ven's body slumped to the ground, lifeless. A moment of silence hung in the air. Then, Nala opened her eyes and looked at Jackson. Her expression was unreadable. Let's get out of here, she said, turning away. They made their way back to Jackson's ship, their footsteps echoing in the silence. As they reached the loading platform, they were confronted by a squad of Nova Prime security forces. Halt! You are under arrest for the murder of Tyos Ven and multiple counts of assault. Jackson sighed. Just another day at the office. He raised his hands in surrender, but Nala didn't move. She stood beside him, her eyes blazing with defiance. We won't go quietly, she said, her voice a challenge. The security forces opened fire. Jackson and Nala returned fire, their weapons spitting death. They fought their way through the security forces, back to Jackson's ship. As they blasted off into space, leaving Nova Prime behind, Jackson couldn't help but smile. He didn't know where they were going, but he knew one thing for sure, their adventure had just begun. As Nova Prime shrunk into a distant point of light behind them, Jackson turned to Nala. So, he said, where to now? Nala stared out the viewport, her face pensive. I need to find something Ven stole from me a long time ago, she said. And what is that, something? Jackson inquired. Nala hesitated, as if reluctant to share. Information, she finally said. Information about my brother's death. Ven claimed to have evidence that could expose the humans who were responsible. And you believed him? Jackson raised an eyebrow. I had no choice, Nala retorted. It was the only lead I had. Jackson nodded. He understood the desperation that could drive a person to make questionable choices. All right, he said. We'll find your information. But we're going to do it my way. And how is that? Nala asked skeptically. We're going to find someone who knows Ven's operation inside and out, Jackson said. Someone who can tell us where he stashed his secrets. Nala considered this. And who do you have in mind? Jackson grinned. An old friend. A contact who knows everyone and everything in the criminal underworld. He owes me a favor or two. And what makes you think this friend will help us? Nala asked. Because he knows that crossing me is bad for his health, Jackson said, his voice hardening. And because he knows I always pay my debts. I see, Nala said, a hint of amusement in her voice. So you're not entirely the noble hero you pretend to be. Nobody's entirely noble, Jackson said, meeting her gaze. But I try to do the right thing when I can. He punched in the coordinates for their destination, a seedy space station known as the Wheel, located on the fringes of civilized space. As the ship jumped into hyperspace, Jackson leaned back in his seat, his thoughts swirling. He was drawn into a web of intrigue and danger, and he was partnered with a woman who was as beautiful as she was deadly. He had no idea what the future held, but he knew it was going to be one hell of a ride. Flashback. Days later, Jackson sat alone in a dark corner of a dingy bar on Nova Prime, nursing a glass of cheap whiskey. He was just a kid then, barely old enough to shave, and his life was a mess. He'd grown up on the streets, an orphan with nothing but his wits to survive. He'd learned to fight, to steal, to do whatever it took to stay alive. One day, he'd been caught stealing from a wealthy merchant. He'd expected to be beaten, maybe even killed. But instead, the merchant had offered him a choice: work for him, or face the consequences. Jackson had chosen to work. He'd been a runner, a messenger, a bodyguard. He'd seen things no kid should ever see: violence, corruption, and betrayal. He'd learned that the galaxy was a dark and dangerous place, where the strong preyed on the weak. But he'd also learned that there were people who cared, people who were willing to fight for what was right. He'd met Corvus Vale, a grizzled old bounty hunter who had taken him under his wing. Corvus had taught him everything he knew: how to track a target, how to shoot a weapon, how to survive in the harshest environments. More importantly, Corvus had taught him the value of honor and integrity. He'd shown him that it was possible to be a good person, even in a bad world. Jackson owed Corvus everything. He knew that he would never be able to repay him for all he had done. But he could try to live up to the standards he had set. He could try to be a hero, even if it meant putting his life on the line. He drained his glass and stood up, his determination renewed. He had a mission to complete, and he wouldn't let anything stand in his way. He was Jackson Reynolds, and he was ready for whatever the galaxy threw at him. End flashback. The ship exited hyperspace, and the wheel loomed before them, a chaotic jumble of metal and lights. Jackson took a deep breath and prepared himself for what was to come. The shadows of suspicion were closing in, and he knew that their journey was about to become a lot more dangerous. The wheel was everything Jackson expected and less: a swirling monument to desperation, vice, and the ever-present hunger for a quick credit. The air reeked of stale synthale, engine grease, and something vaguely floral that probably masked something far more sinister. Charming, Nala commented dryly as they disembarked. Her blue skin seemed to absorb the neon glare, making her stand out even in this motley crowd. Think of it as character building, Jackson replied, his hand resting casually on the butt of his blaster. Our contact prefers to keep a low profile. He's got a place in the lower levels. Name's Quark. Navigating the station's labyrinthine corridors was like threading a needle in a hurricane. They passed gambling dens, brothels catering to every conceivable taste, and black market stalls overflowing with illicit goods. Jackson kept his eyes peeled for trouble, while Nala scanned the crowds with a wary intensity. He better be worth this, she muttered as they descended into the station's grimy underbelly. The air grew thicker, the shadows deeper, and the station's inhabitants took on a distinctly predatory air. They found Quark's place tucked away in a forgotten corner, a small, cluttered room filled with blinking screens, tangled wires, and the faint smell of ozone. Quark himself was a diminutive being of indeterminate species, with bulging eyes, twitching antennae, and a voice that sounded like gravel gargling with acid. "Reynolds," Quark croaked, his antennae drooping in what might have been a greeting. "Haven't seen you in cycles. What brings you to my humble abode?" "Need some information, Quark," Jackson said, cutting to the chase. "About Tyos Venerable. I need to know where he kept his secrets." Quark's eyes narrowed. Ven was a dangerous man. Knowing his secrets could get you killed. "I'm already working with someone else who doesn't think twice about killing," Jackson gestured to Nala. "But this will speed up my time to adjust with this beautiful one who does not believe in humans. Now are you going to help us, or am I going to have to get creative?" Quark hesitated, then sighed. Fine. But you didn't hear it from me. Ven had a hidden vault on the outer rim, deep in the asteroid belt. It's heavily guarded, but if anyone can get past the defenses, it's you too." He provided the coordinates. Nala examined the data. "Why are you helping us?" she asked Quark, her voice laced with suspicion. Quark shrugged. "Ven crossed me once. This is just evening the score." As they left Quark's place, Nala turned to Jackson. "You trust him?" "As far as I can throw him," Jackson said. "But he gave us what we needed. Now it's up to us to get past those defenses." That night, as they prepared for their journey to the outer rim, Nala finally opened up about her past. She spoke of Cygnus Prime, her home world, a paradise of lush forests, pristine rivers, and vibrant culture. She described her family, her dreams, and the life that was stolen from her by the arrival of the humans. "They came with promises of progress and prosperity," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "But all they brought was destruction and despair. They exploited our resources, polluted our land, and enslaved our people." She told Jackson about her mother, a respected healer who fought tirelessly to save her people from the diseases brought by the humans. She spoke of her brother, a warrior who resisted the human occupation and was eventually killed for his defiance. "I watched as my world was torn apart," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I vowed to avenge my people, to make the humans pay for what they did." Jackson listened in silence, his heart aching for her pain. He knew that nothing he could say would ease her suffering, but he wanted her to know that he understood. "I can't imagine what you've been through," he said softly. "But I promise you, I'll do everything I can to help you get justice." Nala looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help me? You're a human." "Maybe I'm not like the others," Jackson said, meeting her gaze. "Maybe I believe in something more than greed and power. Maybe I believe in justice. And maybe I care about you." Nala didn't respond, but Jackson saw a flicker of something in her eyes, a spark of hope, a hint of trust. He knew that he had a long way to go before he could truly earn her trust, but he was willing to try. Their journey to the outer rim was uneventful, but Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He scanned the sensors constantly, but he found nothing. It was as if someone was tracking them with technology that was beyond his capabilities. They reached the asteroid belt and began their search for Ven's hidden vault. The asteroids were scattered like cosmic debris, a graveyard of shattered worlds and broken dreams. Jackson navigated the treacherous terrain with skill and precision, his ship weaving through the asteroid field like a dancer in a deadly ballet. Finally, they found it, a massive asteroid that had been hollowed out and converted into a fortified base. The entrance was hidden behind a cloaking field, but Jackson's sensors were able to penetrate the deception. "Looks like Quark wasn't lying," he said, his voice grim. "This place is heavily guarded." "Then let's give them something to guard," Nala said, her eyes gleaming with determination. "Let's show them what happens when you mess with us." They launched their attack with a combination of stealth and brute force. Jackson disabled the outer defenses with a series of precision strikes, while Nala infiltrated the base using her agility and stealth skills. They fought their way through the guards, their weapons blazing, until they reached the vault. The vault was protected by a complex energy shield, but Jackson was able to disable it with a series of coded commands. As the shield flickered and died, Nala stepped forward and opened the vault. Inside, they found rows of data storage devices, each containing a piece of Ven's criminal empire. Jackson began downloading the data, while Nala searched for the information about her brother's death. "This is it," she said, holding up a small data crystal. "This contains the truth about what happened to my brother." As she inserted the crystal into her data pad, a holographic image flickered to life. It showed a group of humans torturing and killing Nala's brother, their faces contorted with cruelty and hatred. Nala gasped, her face pale with horror. Jackson put his arm around her, trying to comfort her. "I'm so sorry, Nala," he said softly. "I wish I could take away your pain." "It's not your fault," she said, her voice trembling. "But I will make them pay for this. I will make them all pay." Suddenly, an alarm blared through the base. "Intruders detected. Seal the vault." "We've been compromised," Jackson said. "We need to get out of here now." They raced back to their ship, pursued by a horde of angry guards. As they blasted off into space, Jackson looked back at the base, his heart filled with a mixture of anger and sadness. He knew that their journey was far from over, and that the road ahead would be long and dangerous. But he was determined to help Nala get justice, no matter what the cost. They escaped into hyperspace, leaving the exploding base behind. As they sped through the void, Nala replayed the holographic recording of her brother's death over and over again. Jackson watched her, his heart breaking for her pain. He knew that she was consumed by rage, and that she was capable of anything. "What are you going to do?" he asked her softly. Nala looked at him, her eyes filled with a cold, hard light. "I'm going to kill them," she said. "I'm going to kill every human who was involved in my brother's death. And then I'm going to kill everyone who supported them. I'm going to make them suffer the same pain that they inflicted on my people." Jackson's heart sank. He knew that Nala was justified in her anger, but he couldn't let her become a mass murderer. "Nala, you can't do that," he said. "You can't let revenge consume you. You'll become just like them." "What choice do I have?" she asked, her voice rising in anger. "They destroyed my world, they killed my family, they took everything from me. What else is there for me to do but make them pay?" "There's always a choice," Jackson said. "You can choose to forgive, you can choose to heal, you can choose to build a better future. But you can't choose to destroy yourself in the process." Nala stared at him, her face contorted with anguish. "I don't know if I can," she said. "I don't know if I can ever forgive them. I don't know if I can ever heal." Jackson took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "I know you can," he said. "Because I believe in you. I believe in your strength, I believe in your courage, and I believe in your capacity for love." Nala looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for believing in me." Jackson pulled her close, holding her tight. He knew that their journey was far from over, and that they would face many more challenges in the days to come. But he was determined to help Nala find peace, to help her heal, and to help her build a better future. And he knew that, together, they could overcome anything.